GM, GA, GE. This is Cup of Joe with Web3 Joe. That's Web3 Job Ops and Events, your hub, headquarters, and home base for all things Web3 talent and recruitment. They power these spaces every Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Well, we do the best to fill this next 30, 40 minutes or so with as much value as possible. We do so by bringing on dope people from the space who come on and tell us a little bit about how you can land your dream job in Web3. We're very honored to have Mr. Tony Pham, the CMO of KAVA
Hello,
Chain.
this is Tony.
Yes, right on time. I had faith. I knew it'd come through, and it did right on time. Tony, how are you doing? Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad everything worked out.
Of course, it always does when you have faith and a positive attitude, or at least I'd like to think often. Look at this room, man. Kava Chain has some community behind it. This is more listeners than we've had in a while.
Oh, yeah. We're very fortunate. I think that's one of the most important things in Web3, like making sure you take care of your community, building it up, staying engaged.
Well, clearly you guys are doing a great job. I love the fact that we have so many people in here because I know you have a ton of insights to share on today's topic, which is how to get hired, how to succeed professionally in Web3. Of course, once again, you are the CMO for Kava Chain. Shout out to Kava. Thank you for sharing some of your time with us. And let's go ahead and jump in. I did my best to give an intro, but Tony, for those who are a little bit less familiar, can you let the people know who you are, what you do, and how you got started doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here with everyone today. My name is Tony Pham. I'm the CMO at Kava, which is a protocol that has been around since the early days. And so I think that's partly why we've been able to build this strong protocol. We're in the DeFi as well as the DAI space. Perhaps one of the things we're most known for is that Tether uses Kava to bring USDT into the Cosmos ecosystem. And I myself, before becoming the Kava CMO, was at SuperLayer, where I was the marketing partner at that venture studio supporting early stage founders across a range of Web3 projects. Before SuperLayer, I was leading marketing as the VP at Cadena, which was a layer one blockchain, started by the creators of JP Morgan's first blockchain. And then previously, I was at Trust Token, the now called Archblock, the makers of the TUSD stablecoin, and that was back in 2018. So I've been in the Web3 space for a minute now.
Wow, you've had the opportunity to work for some really cool teams. Looking back, like what are some of your favorite milestones you think of during your time professionally in Web3?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how our space has evolved. Even early days with Trust Token, Archblock, USD, I remember back then there was a huge conversation around, are stablecoins going to be crypto backed, algorithmic, US dollar backed, and now we know that the US dollar ones are the strongest ones that have emerged the winners. But back then we didn't really know, and it was a lot of work. It was both a challenge and an opportunity to build out the case for that and tell that story and why it's important to be using that collateral of the US dollar so the value stays constant and reliable. And now it's something people kind of just assume or take for granted, but that wasn't the case back in 2018. And so it's been fun to see that journey and how the work of messaging, positioning, education, community building all really pays off.
Absolutely. Well, shout out to you and everybody working hard over at Kava for everything you've been able to accomplish and contribute over the years. I'd love to jump into the meat of the conversation, which is how to get hired in Web3. We got a lot of individuals listening here. Shout out to Gunny, shout out to Hera, shout out to Mint Condition, a buddy from the V Friends community. Shout out to Julia, shout out Alozi. We appreciate you stopping by. Tony, I want to ask, what are some ways that folks can get the conversation started with a potential employer here in Web3?
Absolutely. Happy to discuss this. I mean, I think whether it's online, in real life, ideally both, for me, it's always been about the networking, the relationship building. That's how I made the transition from Web 2 into Web 3, is people had seen what I had already accomplished, helping some consumer products grow. And originally we're just like, hey, I know a couple guys working on this thing called a stable coin. Would you be open just to having a chat with them? Maybe just giving some perspective, bouncing ideas. And I was like, sure, absolutely happy to share learnings. And over time, we kept on meeting more and more. And it was like, oh, would you be open to joining the team? And so that's just one example of how it started. And I think that's part of it too, is like approaching things from a perspective of how to help out, how to contribute versus right away going for just the transactional aspect of it, because sometimes like the timing isn't right in that moment, but you never know a couple weeks later, a couple months later, because projects and the space are changing so rapidly. Along those lines, I also want to add, like, for whether I'm at Kava or Superlayer at Cadena, something I look for is who is a really active community member that is really showing up just because they're genuinely enthusiastic, and demonstrating that they're taking the time to learn about all the updates. They're paying attention to the space. They're developing those relationships with other folks. And as there are openings or opportunities, or like maybe we have like events coming up around the world and we need people to help out and collaborate with us, those are some of the folks that are the top of mind for me, of like, oh yeah, let's reach out to those people. And then, I'm looking for individuals who have demonstrated their own. I think in some ways it's easier when you've already, like, if you're an investor, but if you're somebody who's just like learning, I want to encourage everyone to keep in mind we're all learning. The space is still new, and it's there's always so much that a fresh take, a smart take, posting content, showing that they're really thinking about things in a sharp way, that's going to get my attention too. I don't think you have to have like, whatever people might think of as like, oh, you've worked at like X company, because we all at one point or another weren't working in Web3 yet. And so there's a lot of different avenues and paths there.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of good points. You said leverage your network, lead with value, play the long game. You might not always get the results you're looking for right away, but if you're genuine and consistent, that can result in opportunity later down the line. And then be genuinely interested, right? Actually care to add value and to improve whatever project or team you're looking to actually potentially join. On that note, actually, of like always being a student and always learning, what advice or what words would you share with those listening right now who may feel a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of sectors and worlds and niches in Web3? What advice would you have for them in terms of maybe focusing in and focusing their efforts on what they're passionate about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the reality is there's so many different facets and aspects to Web3. And so I do think that it makes sense to figure out what are the areas that you're most interested in, you're most drawn to. Where do you find yourself the spending your free time just wanting to learn because it's fun for you? And so, not everybody maybe wants to know about cryptography or zero knowledge proofs, and that's okay. But maybe some people are really interested in prediction markets. That's a huge space in and of itself. You can get really deep in just that, right? And then figure out who are the thought leaders, the KOLs, what are the bloggers, the YouTubers that are really talking about that. Pay attention to that specific industry slice and see what's always happening, and how the latest changes are coming up, right? And another area I mentioned earlier, stablecoins. That in and of itself, huge, right? So many people are doing things in that space, and so much upside, and we're only starting to see the beginning of it. So, like even with that, do you want to be on the like settlement processing side of things? Do you want to be on the like enterprise ecosystem side of things? Do you want to be more on the consumer facing end user side of things? And I think it's really smart and strategic to pick a lane.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. How about when it comes to you got the team's attention, you even got a call booked. Now it's time to go into that call, whether it be a more formal interview or maybe a more casual conversation. What are some tips to go into that chat, making sure you're prepared to properly demonstrate the value that you bring to the team?
Yeah. Um, I would say always be prepared, and I can't say that enough, and it sounds so simple, and it's one of the easiest and most successful things that anybody can do, and you might be surprised how many people don't do it, right? I think it's like people are really sleeping on that aspect of things. Um, the readiness, and I also wanna say one of the great things about Web3 is that I appreciate that oftentimes it's not super, at least early stages, it's not super formal and rigid. Like, here's the checklist, here's the matrix we have to do. It's much more free flowing, like the conversation you and I are having, which I just think is a lot more interesting. Because in addition to your knowledge, people want to see how do you think and how do you relate and how do you adapt and respond and can you be flexible and not just stick to a certain script, right? And so I think there's so many different ways to prepare. Obviously, use AI. It's an amazing tool out there, right? So whether you want to use Perplexity, ChatGPT, Claude Anthropic, Gemini, whatever, to do your research. But in addition to that, dig into whether it's like the white paper, blog posts, presentations that different people on the team have been giving, podcast interviews, YouTube videos, all of that is really good material. And really think about a question about something that somebody said, and they're going to be like, wow, that person actually paid attention. I like, already you're standing out by demonstrating that. I also think paying attention to what's happening in the cycle because there's so many ups and downs, there's so many ebbs and flows, and so notice like maybe somebody didn't read something that just happened last night and you can bring it into the conversation and like help them to see something, and like that's appreciated. Everybody likes learning, everybody welcomes that, right? um and so I think those are a couple things to do that are beyond the obvious of just like, obviously you're gonna like Google them. Obviously, I would say like look people up on like their backgrounds of what other projects and teams have they been on. But there's so many ways to really make sure that you're educated and so that you have like a foundation, and then that gives you the space and the freedom to get more creative as well and get into show your problem solving abilities.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of really good concrete tips that people can walk away with. I just want to reshare a few of those. Be prepared overall, right? In some ways you can be prepared. Leverage AI. There's no excuse in 2026. There's so many tools that are mostly free or very available for you to use to get prepared. Dive into the team's content, whether that be socials, whether that be the actual executive profiles, whether that be IRL event content, whatever it is, dive in. Have a question or maybe a couple informed questions you can ask during the interview that highlight the fact that you actually are genuinely interested in what's going on, actually genuinely informed on what's going on, and actually genuinely curious on where things are going and how you can be a part of it. And then I love this tip of being of paying attention to the context of the actual market and trends. I mean, we say every day in this space there's never a boring day in Web3. Leverage that, right? Be aware, be conscious of what's going on and how that impacts the team that you're going for and the value that you can bring to the table. So great points, Tony. Here's a topic that I'm always interested to hear folks' thoughts on: negotiation. What are your thoughts on negotiation? When is it appropriate? When is it not, if ever? And what are some tips people can walk away with to make sure that they're successful in their next negotiation?
Perhaps other people would disagree, but my personal professional perspective is always negotiate. I think there's no harm in negotiating. I think it shows that you're somebody who's willing to advocate for yourself. I think it demonstrates that you're paying attention to the larger professional space. And to me, I would take it as like, here's somebody that knows their value and knows their worth. Like I see zero downside in negotiating. And so let's say you're going to negotiate then. And so from that point, I would say, again, do your research and talk to other people who are already working in Web3 and see, like, can they help you to start to establish some benchmarks and gather that data around, like, for a project of this size that's like, has this much in their treasury or their funding, that's reached certain milestones. What do you see like the market responding to? uh Recruiters like Min and Web3, like, and places like that, oftentimes people in those communities are open to sharing. And that's one of the ways, like, in addition to talking about like, here's a job opportunity, people can say, like, here are the different bands that are happening. Like, right now we're in a little bit more of a bear cycle, so then you might see changes in the comp that people are willing to offer. Maybe it's more about like the tokens and less about the cash. And so these are all things to be keeping in mind. I've also seen some folks put out like surveys and reports of just like anonymously gathering, like, what do you do in Web3? What level responsibility do you have? How much are you making? And so I definitely think the data is out there so that people don't have to go in blind and that they can feel more empowered going into these negotiations. And I think you want to also show what is the value you're going to add depending on where the team, the project is, and how they're looking to grow. So if they've announced like, oh, we're excited to put this on the roadmap to debut at the end of the year, maybe you talk about like, how do you see what you're going to do contributing to that, right? And make that really clear.
Great points, Tony. I definitely appreciate your perspective of like always negotiate, always have something to advocate for yourself. And many places will see that as a strength, actually, and respect you for it. You're not the first person to have that opinion on our stage, and I definitely appreciate it. So I think a lot of people out here could. Gain value from hearing that. I think many of us are a little bit more on the hesitant side when it comes to negotiating, but I think it's about what you just said, coming prepared, being educated, and making sure that you're doing your best that both sides walk away with a win-win, right? Which is really the goal. We are just about ready to start winding down. We're going to touch on our theme of the week, which we do every single week on this show, where we dive into one specific focus of the getting hired, being successful process. And then we're going to go over our brief closing questions. Our theme of the week is personal branding. So, Tony, how do you define personal branding?
Thanks for asking. For me, I think for some people, maybe personal branding is about the Instagram photo, the TikTok video. That's not how I approach it. It's just not like, as for me, those things are personal. They're more fun, right? I know some people are able to have one foot in each world. That doesn't seem like, for me, as like organic. And so I lean more into like crypto, Twitter, X, and more into being in different community groups on Telegram and writing thought content and being on podcasts, speaking at events, things like that, right? But I think there's many ways to go about it. It's more about, similar to picking your lane or your vertical in the industry. What are the channels and the outlets and the communities that are going to make the most sense for you when it comes to your branding? And also, what is going to be legit, because people can tell right away. Like, are you forcing it? Are you trying too hard? Are you actually a degen? Or like, not. And that's okay if you're not, right? Maybe you're just like really geeky and technical. Great. Maybe you're just all about the hustle and the deal making. Great, right? For me, my background obviously is marketing, and I'm really passionate about communities. And so those are things that like are easy and exciting for me to share about. And so that's kind of like how I go about it. And I think it's my take is that we are in a space where it's almost too simple and too lazy just to be controversial for controversy's sake, right? I'm like, I'm not afraid to take a unpopular position, but I'm also not gonna just like be like, oh, that's horrible or what a fail as a knee jerk reaction because I know how hard it can be to build things. And I know that sometimes things don't go your way, right? So I respect people for putting themselves out there. And at the same time, I believe in transparency. And I think that we need more good actors. And so if people are saying things and they have no idea what they're talking about, or they're making promises and they're completely falling short of them, I think there's a responsibility to speak to that as well. Um, and so I think if you look at some of the content I put out there, some of the things I've like commented on or like co-authored or the perspectives that I share, um, for me, it's about how to continue to up level marketing in Web3. How do we continue to not just make it like, great if we're at an event at a conference and there's free drinks, but what can you do there to really make it of value to everybody who's attending, making it easier for people to have those conversations. How do we bring together people who are really building? Like maybe there's like a small panel at the start of an event, and it really allows everybody to not just like talk about their own project and what they're working on, but really give each other the flowers. And I think people find those types of conversations more refreshing in many ways. And there's a lot more that we can get out of it. And also like beyond, airdrops are great if it's like in your jurisdiction, but like beyond that, what can you do to really uh, engage community, show you value them, respect them? And so that's kind of how I've approached the topic of personal branding. And I think, again, I try to pay attention to, in my case, other marketing professionals like Jay at Eco, the stablecoin company, who I've known for a while, and I respect his work. And I share what he does and I comment on what he does. I don't make it just about myself.
Great insights there, Tony. I'm ready to go ahead and move into our closing section. I know you're a very busy man, so just a few more questions. But our first of our closing questions is, what are your favorite and least favorite parts of working in crypto?
Hmm. Uh, I mean, one thing that immediately comes to mind, and the answer is like it's both my favorite and my least favorite in some ways, right? So I really appreciate that our space is so global, and so that means like there is, there the leading industry events are happening around the world, and I like that we really get to connect with each other in that way. And there's such an amazing energy that comes together. And the flip side of it, like the realities of like jet lag and time zones and potentially getting sick, probably not as fun. But I think over time I've developed, certain self-care routines like drinking lots of emergency juices, getting on a plane, if I'm jumping time zones, I'm going to sleep right away, even if it's like the afternoon in my departure time. Lots of hand sanitizer if I'm going to be shaking hands. Maybe I just don't shake hands and I do fist bumps instead. So these are all things to think about in terms of like least and most favorite. I mean, I think for me, for sure, least favorite. Let's go back to the piece around. Um, Unfortunately, like in any space, there's some like scammers out there. Certainly, it's like a huge opportunity, and some people are gonna see it as a chance to just like try to take advantage. But my favorite part is like by and large, the vast majority of people that I meet online, in person, both are really trying, they're aligned with the values of Web3 when we're talking about decentralization and transparency and efficiency and community building. And everyone is trying to move forward together. And I've been through multiple bear and bull cycles now. And I do believe in WAGMI. We're all gonna make it. It's gonna be okay. And my favorite aspect is because we're doing it together, right? And there's a larger community beyond your specific project. It's the broader ecosystem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's clearly something that you guys are very good at over at Kava. Just reflected by the immense participation in this spaces today. Again, shout out to everybody in here: Gabu, Alozi, Romero, Moses, Jerwin, Neil, Manny, Jack, Clint, Man, Weasley, Rudy. We appreciate everybody in here. Hopefully you're showing love to Tony as well, even though you're probably already familiar with him. Make sure you're giving him a follow. And if you're looking to get involved in Web3 professionally, follow Web3 Job Ops as well. Got just a couple more questions. Tony, you've dropped so much game on us in these last 30 minutes. What final advice would you like to leave listeners with in regards to either getting hired in Web3 or advancing their careers in Web3?
Thanks again for all the great questions. So my hot sip tip for everyone here is going to be uh, educate yourself, be prepared, and have a perspective that is differentiated and show that you have contributed that somehow, whether it's a post or sharing in community or co-organizing an event, right? I want to see that follow through. A lot of people can talk about how like, oh yeah, they've been really curious about crypto, but who actually is already demonstrating and proving that they are showing up? Because that's like so much of it, right? Let me see your proof of contribution.
Absolutely. The work starts generally way before you ever have that initial conversation. So get started now. And if you're in here, you're doing something right. If you're following Tony, you're doing something right. If you're following Web3 Job Ops, you're doing something right. And we appreciate y'all. Tony, I got one more question for you. All the value you've dropped, I would love if you could share how we can better support you and all the awesome work that you got going on over at KAVA Chain.
Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, so for sure, always welcome if people want to follow me on X. I'm just at Tony Pham. Please do follow Kava. They're at Kava underscore chain. In addition, please follow Kava on their various community channels, whether that is on Discord or Reddit. We're also super active on Telegram. So engage with us, talk with us, have that conversation.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That has been our chat with none other than Mr. Tony Pham, CMO of KAVA Chain. Tony, you are the man. Thank you so much for the time. Any final thoughts before we let you out of here?
Just also want to give a shout out to you and the Web3 Joe community. I mean, I honestly think that as I've been talking about, right, it's not always just about like what you're trying to sell or make, or it's about like connecting people to one another because we all have a lot to learn. As much as I am happy I can like share tips, I'm a constant student as well. So let's always keep in that mindset.
Always, always stronger together, Tony. You got me smiling through my phone here. Can't wait to have you back. Until then, wishing you the best rest of your day. And of course, shout out to you, shout out to KAVA Chain, shout out to everybody in here listening. We are here every Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, powered by none other than Web3 Job Ups and Events. If you're looking to get plugged in with a gig, the TG in that bio is one of the best places to be. Tony, one more time, thank you again. Wishing you the best rest of your day.
Thanks. Have a great day. Have a good weekend, everyone.
You as well. Bye bye, everyone. Rooting for you, and we will see you soon. Take care.